I'm Peter Hindmarsh, and I'm Professor of Paediatric Endocrinology at the Institute of Child Health and responsible for delivering diabetes services for children and young people in north central London.
I just wanted to just say a little bit about Peter Hindmarsh. He was using something called Capgemini, a company called Capgemini, a French company, and they're an IT solutions, data IT corporation, and you can see
Peter had a vision that giving
here
the
in
kids
this video a little bit about that.
blood sugar metrics would actually make them more interested in controlling their own disease. What he didn't know was how to make that vision a reality. So we began to talk to him about 2 years ago about ways in which we in Capgemini could help him make that happen.
What you need sometimes in these projects is a facilitated day to try and really tease out the issues. And with Capgemini, we got that organised with all stakeholders.
We call it an ASE, an Accelerated Solutions Environment, and Accelerated Solutions Environment, and Accelerated Solutions Environment, and Capgemini.
Yeah, accelerated solutions. What does that mean? Quick fix?
Where we brought social workers, teachers, the kids, the families, the Peter's Clinic, and some technology organizations together for one day, and we developed answers to those questions, and we worked out a way of all those organizations and individuals working more closely together to provide the right kind of care and the right kind of support for the children. It was a real breakthrough for Peter in getting a number of people to understand how to make the vision he had a reality.
Also thinking around that a bit more as to how might you go about evaluating this kind of intervention. What we got back was a sense of ownership of their condition. This is something about me, and I'm feeling as though I've actually got more control over where I'm going with my condition.
The easy bit was to actually switch the technology on and make it work. The complex bit was around getting the kids to use it, was around getting them motivated to do it and getting them incentivized to use it on a regular basis. The easy bit was to actually switch the technology on and make it work.
So yeah, note the outsourcing at the end. So Capgemini has actually come under quite a lot of there's some dodgy things that have been reported about Capgemini, and they don't seem to have a great reputation. The guy who started it who founded it was Sergei Kamp, he was working in French government, and so was his successor Paul Hermelin. They both worked in French government, and so there's quite high level connections with this company, with the French government. And actually, Sergei Kamp worked in the French Ministry of Telecommunications, and the guy, and Paul Hermelin, who I think he was his successor. Paul Hermelin was the board leadership, and I think he was successor to the founder, Sergei. So Paul Hermelin was also working in French government in various roles. So and there's another guy that's involved, Ayman Ezzat, I can't pronounce that. Anyway, so this company's got a foot in it. Obviously, it's like, you can't find out that it's the investors and that of BlackRock and people like that. It's all one of these globalist corporations with all the same sort of people that control everything. And Capgemini's also got involvement with ICE, the Federal Law Enforcement Agency in the United States that's brutally removing brutal policies and using thugs to kill Americans and remove immigrants, but doing it in a very brutal way, or supposedly illegal immigrants. I don't know who or what they're doing, but I do know that they're doing it in a very brutally way and they're killing people. And of course, Capgemini are linked with Palantir. So Palantir, I've written before about Palantir a long time ago about its involvement in the NHS and as a data dashboard, and it implementing Capgemini is implementing the Foundry network of Palantir. Palantir is a very dark military connected organization, which is basically, I think in another of my videos and articles I've said about how Palantir is named. Their names are very important to them. Palantir is named. It'll be to do with the Palantiri stones, and the Palantiri stones in Lord of the Rings were the seeing stones that could. They basically, if you've seen the Lord of the Rings and you got for the Palantiri, the seeing stones, and they were these magical stones that they can't directly lie, but they use light in a way that they mislead. So they sort of throw light in a way which makes you see things in a deceptive way, right? So it's to create this sort of deceptive picture, and that's what Palantir's done. It's globally taken this data from all over the internet, the whole world, on behalf of the military and DARPA and these organisations, and then it knows everything about you, and then it's misrepresenting stuff. Okay, so it's all for dark purposes. Well, Capgemini is involved with that, and it's implementing that. So in our health data, in our health services in Europe, linked with Europol and other organisations like that. The other thing that notice always the logos. I mean, they've got an ace of spades as the logo, and the founder came up with that. Well, that's Sergei Kamp. Well, why ace of spades? Ace of spades has a lot of dark connotations with certainly the most powerful card in the pack, the power dynamic, but also with death and snuffing out. It was used in Vietnam by when they killed a member of the Viet Cong. They shoved an ace of spades card down on them, as a dark symbol of death. And the ace of spades has got a lot of dark connotations, so he chose the ace of spades to be the logo for Capgemini. No surprises there. Gemini has a lot of links as well, which I won't go into right now, but the twins, but has a lot of connections for the elites. It's not necessarily negative, but there's power in Gemini, in the symbol of the brothers, the twins, throughout myth and throughout the world history, in the myth of the twins, the brothers. Like the Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux in Greek and Roman mythology. They never choose names randomly with these really powerful companies, and they never choose logos randomly as well. As look at the BT logo, that's it's a serpent, isn't it? And that's no accident. Yeah, and just again about Capgemini. I mean, Cap is head. If you go back to the Roman meaning, so the head, or so Gemini. Well, that's the twin. So. But Gemini is it's an air sign, and Capgemini are involved in the oil and gas industry as well. So gas, in that link there in them doing the tech for that industry as well. And as in Gemini itself, I mean, although some people think the golden age was Virgo, there's others who think it started with Gemini. Either way, Gemini is it's the opposing sign to Sagittarius, and actually I'm Sagittarius. At that time when Gemini and Sagittarius would have been opposing signs, and on the sort of two hinges, which would be in the roughly 26,000 year cycle of the precession of the equinoxes, when Gemini would have been the anchor point at the constellation rising with the sun at the before the sun at the spring equinox, at the vernal equinox. So in the age of Gemini as such, the crossroads of the ecliptic and the equator. I'm talking about the precessional ecliptic and equator. The celestial ecliptic and the equator would be on the same trajectory as the Milky Way, and that would then appear because Gemini and Sagittarius, they do span. That does span. The Milky Way spans the sky between Gemini and Sagittarius. So if it was then the age of Gemini, it would appear that was the gateway to the heavens. And Sagittarius has an asterism of a teapot, and it helps to see the Milky Way, because it does, if you between about February and October in the northern hemisphere, it's best time to spot the Milky Way. I used to have a telescope, and I used to go outside, and if you stand long enough, you can spot the Milky Way. That is, so where the spout of the teapot in Sagittarius is, you can see it rising. The stars of the Milky Way rising out of there. That does span. The Milky Way actually spans Gemini Sagittarius, so this is why it was so important when it became the gateway out of time. The Milky Way was seen as the path of the road out of time. So that's just another sort of symbolic aspect of Gemini. Yeah, and Gemini is also connected with Janus. That's the two-faced god, the god with the Roman god with the one face facing forward and one facing backwards, and it's so he can see into the future and into the past. That's Janus, and it's Gemini. Air, gas, and I'm thinking of Lucy Letby again now. Because we are connected here, aren't we? We go so long, I've got from Capgemini to, Capgemini are dealing with these kind of things, which is odd, isn't it? Now, Hindmarsh using this company in his diabetes care as such, it just makes you wonder, giving this stuff over to these kind of digital solutions as such, how much was being basically outsourced, or so that traditional hands-on monitoring of these children with diabetes maybe was being put on the back burner, and perhaps it was allowing the digital, Capgemini to take over the care as such. And maybe, I'm just sort of speculating here, was the failures of this approach something to do with some of the complaints that ended up being made about him? Because he worked at University College Hospital, didn't he? And also a Great Ormond Street, and these. So perhaps it was involved with him just outsourcing stuff, and perhaps it was not, really, is it a lazy approach? Is it just handing everything over to the digital solutions, expecting children to monitor their own diabetes? Because it seems that, or the parents, perhaps that wasn't really working. I don't know. This is a speculation, but I found this thing about Capgemini and his involvement. Peter Hindmarsh, he had on the day he started giving evidence was, as people have pointed out, was in the trial. It was the day that he started being under investigation by the GMC. For various reasons. That investigation by the GMC was never completed, because Peter Hindmarsh then, he withdrew himself from the medical register. So there was no real findings in that, because he withdrew himself from the medical register in order to presumably prevent the findings. So in my mind, I would have thought that he must have been pretty convinced that they had some bad shit on him, or that they were going to find against him, or that he'd done harm. Because why would you withdraw yourself from the medical register? Why wouldn't you wait? If you were confident in your own expertise, then surely you wouldn't think that you wouldn't withdraw yourself from the medical register. So he must have felt that he'd done something wrong, or that they were going to find that he'd done something wrong. And the GMC usually, it's pretty hard. The GMC are nearly always take the side of doctors, over, they're always, so it's kind of hard to be found for the GMC to find against you as such. So, there must have been quite a lot of evidence that he'd been causing harm in some way. Maybe there was a connection with just outsourcing stuff, to these IT solutions and stuff. I don't know, but... And, considering that he was Health Hero 2017, there's a picture there of him with, as you can see, with Theresa May getting his Health Hero award. How is it that it's always the same people that seem to sort of get these things, I've just, it's like Jairam, isn't he? He's suddenly everywhere. He's the face of racing in Cheshire, and he's TV doctor hero, this, that, and the other on what. And yeah, there he is with his colleague Dawn Harper. Yeah, I've written about her before, sort of an interesting, if you think about Freemasonry, here's a picture of her with her ex-husband. And her website's interesting as well. There's a certain symbolism. Peter Hindmarsh also just happens to be chairman of the Catholic Union Charitable Trust. Yeah, well, I mean, why doesn't that surprise me either? And he did, it seems that he did mislead the court. So was that perjury? Okay, apart from the fact he should have really declared that there was an investigation, although I don't think he legally. Well, it's in the criminal procedure rules. He's supposed to declare, but he probably didn't actually legally have to because he was under investigation. He hadn't been found unfit to practice, but either way, he did actually in court. He answered to the question Nick Johnson asked him, but are you an honorary consultant at Great Ormond Street Hospital? And he answered yes to that. And I know people have mentioned about the little qualification afterwards. I mentioned in the Guardian, didn't they? Said that he then said something about, and it wasn't a qualification in my mind because he then said something which didn't make sense as something about at that stage, yes, which doesn't make sense to the question, are you an honorary consultant at Great Ormond Street Hospital? At stage blah blah isn't an answer to that. And I would refer to other videos I've done on people making on how to spot dishonesty and stuff like that, and these little signs that when the answer to that should have been no, I'm not, because he wasn't at that point, right? And we were talking about are you, that means in the present, are you an honorary consultant? The answer to that is, for him, would have been his contract had been terminated at that point, so and he was under investigation, so the answer would be no, right? But he wasn't at that point, he wasn't. So the answer would be no, but he answered yes, so that was a lie. Anything that he said afterwards in terms of stage blah blah, I'm not at this stage, which didn't even make sense, is irrelevant. He said yes, and that wasn't true, right? And that weird statement afterwards shows that he was trying to qualify, but didn't succeed in qualifying what he'd said because he wasn't telling the truth, right? So, as far as I think that was okay. I'm going to say alleged perjury. That wasn't an honest answer to Nick Johnson's question, and so if I mean he's not the only one, is he? People have been misleading the court and lying in the court in the Letby case. I have to say alleged, but consultants, etc. But these people, and Ajiram has been referred, hasn't he, by David Davis, and nothing still seems to have happened with the chief of police doing anything about that. But if they did, and if these people were brought to court, and if these people were tried for perjury and contempt of court, misleading court, etc., if these people were done and they were found guilty, that would actually have a bearing on the Letby trial, because on the Letby convictions, because that could be seen as new evidence as such. If people were actually found guilty of perjury. So the police should be investigating these things because it's a direct effect on Lucy's trial. She didn't have a fair trial. Can we trust the police to do that? Can we fuck? I mean, right, anyway, yeah, okay, even when you've got an MP who's actually said to them, they've come back and now they're trying to sort of, what did he say about David Davis? I think he's accused David Davis of misleading Parliament now. I mean, yeah, okay, whatever. That's a serious accusation against David Davis. So the whole thing is, they really are desperate, aren't they, to uphold this appalling miscarriage of justice by the most insidious, disgusting means. And drag it out. She's got to have an appeal. She will have an appeal. But they just want to drag it out, don't they? Anyway, so Peter Hindmarsh withdrew himself from the medical register before the investigation, GMC investigation, was completed into his fitness to practice and that. So he withdrew himself, so that investigation will never be completed because he's put a stop to that. So in my mind, he obviously must have thought he'd done something wrong, because otherwise why would you voluntarily withdraw yourself from the register? But he can't be proven to have done anything wrong now because he voluntarily removed himself. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks.